The Leafs are struggling, and has this changed enough to get them back on track? We'll get into this later on in this episode, but before we start, I just wanted to say that 79.5% of you guys aren't subscribed. So if you're enjoying this daily NHL and Leafs content, make sure to go down and hit that subscribe button. But we'll get into the first topic, which is the Leafs are struggling. When you look at the Toronto Maple Leafs, we did just see a loss to the Buffalo Sabres. This was just a ridiculous loss, in my opinion. This is a Buffalo team that had 3 games in the past 4 days, including just coming off a back-to-back. They came in and they just destroyed the Leafs in their own home arena. When you look at the Leafs, they're currently on pace to have under 100 points. When you look at Dom's graphs, they do have an 81% chance at the playoffs and a 4% chance to make the Stanley Cup. But when you look at this team in a whole, everything has looked off so far. The team is struggling to score. Their defense have been struggling royally, and just the defense hasn't looked spectacular. We've seen flashes from Joseph Woll, but these goalies haven't really given a big cushion to the Leafs, and the defense in front of them is not helping. When you do look at the standings, the Toronto Maple Leafs are 5-4-2 with 12 points. This is 8th in the Eastern Conference and 4th in the Atlantic Division. But when you look at this, they're just 1 point behind a team like Tampa Bay, who is playing currently without their starting goaltender in Vasilevsky, and they're tied in points with a team like the Montreal Canadiens, who realistically are a rebuilding team. When you look at this as a whole, yes, it is early season. We're just 11 games in. But we always see the Leafs get off to the slow starts. They always struggle a bit in October into November. But this is just ridiculous when you're looking at this team at a pace where they're not going to hit 100 points. If you're looking at the graphs, the charts, and just overall analytics on stuff like this. And just having this team be in the position where they're not flourishing when this is arguably the best roster they've had in such a long period of time is just ridiculous. When you do look at this, combined 5-on-5 this season, Tyler Bertuzzi, Max Domi, Ryan Reeves, Pontus Holmberg, who hasn't been up for a long time, David Kempf, Noah Gregor, and Kalle Järnkrok have 2 combined 5-on-5 goals. This is just unacceptable when you're looking at the bottom 6 of the Leafs. These are guys that we brought in this offseason. We have a guy like Gregor, who was signed after going into the camp with a PTO. We have a guy like Reeves, who isn't going to be a big goal scorer, but he should be a difference maker on this 4th line. And when you just look again, a guy like Tyler Bertuzzi and Max Domi, who are paying almost $8 million, I think it is $8 million on the dot for these 2 guys. We brought them in. They're supposed to be difference makers. And just for this list to only have 2 5-on-5 goals this season, it's just ridiculous in my opinion. When you look at this as well, you do have your top guys. You have Matthews, Marner, Nylander, who's had a phenomenal season, and John Tavares. These guys are producing. It's just the bottom 6 and the guys that are playing with them are looking fine, minus Bertuzzi, who hasn't looked out incredible at all when you look at him aligned with Matthews or Tavares and Nylander. When you look at this team as well, they only have 35 goals in 11 games, which is a good pace, but they've also given up 36. This just falls back onto the defense as well. We've seen Samsonov struggle a tiny bit. As I said, Joseph Woll has looked incredible and quite frankly bailed us out of quite a few games. But just the defensive responsibility from the forwards. We've seen last night where Marner and Matthews bobbled the puck, ended up being a breakaway on the penalty kill. Joseph Woll made the first big save. It did trickle in. And then ultimately this was just a deciding factor in this game. The team's playing sluggish. The defense haven't looked good. We see a guy like John Klingberg just looked almost terrible so far this year. When you kind of go back and you look at this 5-on-5, the team can score. Last night alone, John Klingberg was -3 in 25 minutes. Keefe did come out and say as well that he hasn't seen forwards defensemen, look this sluggish, look so tired. But when you're playing a guy like John Klingberg 25 minutes, I believe the third pairing got less than 2 or 3 minutes into the third period. And just overall, the team hasn't been balanced. We've seen the defense struggle, as I said. We're seeing the 4 lines being kind of flip-flopped constantly, and it just hasn't looked good for this team at all, and it's a bit concerning. When you do look at this, something has to give at some point. When you ultimately look at this, there was recent reports coming out with the Leafs lines that they did change it up a bit. Matthew Knies has been promoted to the top line with Matthews and Marner. I think this is outstanding. Knies has looked great so far this year. He did struggle. We've seen him and Fraser Minten not really be able to get any offense going earlier on in the season. We've seen him move to the third line where it was Knies, Kempf, and Domi. In my opinion, this line can never be ran back again. I think Kempf isn't the perfect guy when you put him into this line because you're looking for offense. Kempf is, in my opinion, one of the top defensive fourth liners in the league. He's a top penalty killer for us, and he does have specialties. But using this guy to kind of motivate the line or to try to get more offense is not what you really want and what you're looking for. When you do look at this as well, Bertuzzi, Tavares, Nylander, I'm just going to say I'm not a big fan of this. We've seen Bertuzzi benched multiple times. We've seen him demoted to the fourth line. I think Bertuzzi needs a almost extended period on the third line. I do see the pros of this. Maybe you put him with Tavares and Nylander. Hope to get some offense going. Hope to spark something. I know he was a streaky player in Detroit, but overall he hasn't looked good, especially for his $5 million price tag that we did bring him in for. When you look at the third line, Domi, Holmberg, and Järnkrok. Now, when David Alter did put this tweet out, he did say it might be Domi at center. Will confirm. I think they're kind of trying this line out. Domi can play center, but we've seen Holmberg play in the AHL. And when he came up on this fourth line playing center, so I do believe he will be there. But when you look at this, there is a bit more offense. You do put Kempf back down to the fourth line. Domi is a guy that has been struggling. Järnkrok has looked good so far this year. And Holmberg has looked good. It was hard to get a good read on him when you have him buried on that fourth line. So ultimately, I do like the idea of trying this line out. I just don't know how much more offense this will bring. When you kind of look at it, as I said, the team has two 5-on-5 goals. And the guys you have on your third line currently are Max Domi, Pontus Holmberg, and David Kempf. When you're looking at this, I don't think this is going to generate much more offense. Like I said, Pontus Holmberg is a guy that we didn't get to see a lot as he was on the fourth line. So maybe this does change something gives here. But in my opinion, I think you call up a guy like Nick Robertson, a guy that can score. We've seen him score in the AHL. We've seen him play well in the NHL. You have a guy like Bobby McMahon, who had a good little stint with the Leafs before an injury. He did look good in the AHL. And a guy like Alex Steeves, who's playing incredible as well. This is not against Holmberg. I just think it's a situation where you bring a winger up, you put Domi into this line where you put him as a center, let him play make. You have a guy like, I don't know, Nick Robertson that can put up the goals for you. And then you have a guy like Järnkrok that can be more responsible. He can still tip in goals. He's still a guy that can pot 20 in a good year. So overall, I think this is the sense where you bring up a guy, as I said, from the AHL, Robertson, Steeves, McMahon, one of these guys. And when you do look at the fourth line of Gregor, Kempf, and Reeves, I think Gregor has been incredible so far this year. David Kempf has struggled. We've seen him coming from Chicago. He hasn't put up a lot of points. He's the type of guy who's going to be strictly your defensive guy. And a guy like Reeves, who has struggled mightily, I think it was something, his goals for percentage was one of the worst in the league. I think this fourth line has a chance to maybe have a bounce back. I think Keefe needs to trust these guys in a bit more of a sense instead of playing them for a minute and a half, benching them for 12, giving them another minute and a half, benching them for 10, giving them 2 minutes. I think you need to kind of let these guys get into the flow of the game, and I think that's the big thing. Now, when you look at the defense as well, Riley Brody, we've seen before. McCabe and Klingberg does kind of worry me. We've seen that McCabe is coming back from injury. He might not play next game, but he is practicing, which is a good sign. But we've seen this D pairing look awful to start the year, and I think it's a big kind of worry when you look at this where they have to run it back maybe for an extended period of time, where a guy like Timothy Liljegren's out, Legas and Benoit, and then you have Giordano, who's absent right now but should get back into the lineup. When you kind of look at this team in a whole, it's not looking promising. I've been a Leafs fan my entire life, but it's just a worrisome starts to the season. You see these guys, like I said, Bertuzzi, you've brought in a guy like Domi. These guys were supposed to come in, make these impacts, and just kind of be the breakers of the lines in the sense of you brought these guys in. They're supposed to produce on offense. They're supposed to be gritty. And so far, we haven't seen much of any of it. A guy like John Klingberg has looked horrendous in most games. I think he's a guy, if he's paired with a defensive guy, I think he can have a bounce back year. If you look at the positive, these guys have to get better in senses. We have to see Bertuzzi have a hot streak. A guy like Domi to get back into his groove. And a guy like Klingberg, we just need to see him finally step up. If he can play average on the third pairing, this is good. If he can play above average, I mean, that's outstanding. They just need to get to these average parts. They need to get over these humps, the struggles, all this. Something has to give. If that's something where Sheldon Keefe maybe has a stern talking to, maybe the league or the GM looks at him and maybe moves on to a new guy like, I don't know, Guy Boucher, or assistant coach. Maybe you look at this team and you do a little shake-up. I know I've talked about Zadorov before. Just something has to give. What's your guys' thoughts on this? You can leave a comment down below. Do you think this is on the coaching, the players, the core five? Maybe this is defense, goalies. What do you think it's going to take for this team to get out of this slump and just get to where everyone expected it? But we'll get into everyone's favorite topic, which is comment of the day. The comment of the day today comes from Pat G. Mafia. He says, "Good show, Mark. I just want to say thank you. I know there's a lot of comments that weren't too positive. I might not be too positive this video. I do think the Leafs are going to turn around. It's just frustrating as a fan, just constantly seeing this team struggle out of the gates, figure things out, and just kind of collapse in the playoffs. This team needs a hot start. You see Colorado do it. You've seen Vegas do it. These are two contenders. And when you see this team kind of come in, you lose a game to Buffalo, who played 3 games in 4 days, coming off a back-to-back as well. See this team struggle against Montreal, Chicago. It's not a good look for the team. And I think overall, just something has to be changed at this point. As I said, it could be a coach, it could be a forward, defenseman. I think the goalies are fine. I do think they will figure this out. But something has to give. Make sure to go down and leave a comment on what your opinion on all this as well. The slow start. What do you think the Leafs should do? Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure to go down and leave a like, subscribe, comment. Just leave whatever you like. We enjoy you guys just watching these videos, but take care.